We're talking about the latest from prolific Iranian filmmaker Jafar Panahi. It's called No Bears. Iran told him to stop making movies, and he keeps making movies, and they're pretty spectacular in their own understated way. So, Alonso, please tell us about this one.
آقای مهندس این اجده ما رو ریخته به هم این مازره همه ما رو فلج کرده.
Yeah, all the more prolific, I think, since being under house arrest. So yeah, this is the latest from Jafar Panahi. He is once again playing himself. He's done that for many of his most recent movies, Taxi and Three Faces, and This Is Not a Film. So this time he is kind of hiding out in a small village that is near the Turkish border, and gets kind of wrapped up in some local intrigue, let's say, where there's a woman who has been promised to this one guy, but she would rather marry somebody else. Panahi takes a picture, which might be compromising to the situation, and various forces are trying to force him to hand it over. Meanwhile, the authorities are sort of wondering why he's there so close to the border. And if you saw my top 10 list at the Wrap, I turned it into 5 sort of double features of films that I thought were thematically connected. And it was interesting that Jafar Panahi is making this movie this year, while his son Panah Panahi made his debut last year with a movie called Hit the Road that we reviewed and we're both big fans of, which also deals with the border and the possibility of leaving the country as opposed to sort of staying and make a difference, which is what Jafar Panahi has been doing. I suspect that if he wanted to get out, he might have figured out a way to do it, but he's chosen to stay and fight, and by fight I mean to continue making movies, even though the government has forbidden him to. So this is another great movie. Again, it was on my top 10 list for 2022. What I think it captures really well is how this sense of mob rule, but that is always presented very politely. Like people come to his house to threaten him, but it's always in a way of like suggestion, and we think it would be best. And
they sit down and they have tea.
Exactly. Yeah. It's all very like there's a lot of, etiquette going on, but at the same time, it is unquestionable that he's being pushed around and threatened. And so as such, I think that makes it a really kind of powerful film about living under authoritarianism, where it isn't always necessarily the gun pointed at your face, but it doesn't, but there's still that level of threat and that level of you must capitulate to what I want, even if it's being presented in a way that doesn't scream out as like you are being threatened by an authoritarian. So yeah, I found it really tense and oddly funny at times, and very observant about just sort of the culture of these small towns and the suspicion of what's this guy even doing here. And there's a lot happening. The speech in which the title is explained, I thought was really great.
Wonderful.
At sort of unpacking the central metaphor of the movie. So yeah, I dug it.
So yeah, there are these 2 stories going on at the same time, and you don't know what is a movie and what is real, and what is Jafar Panahi, quote unquote, what's he actually doing?
Sure.
And the transitions are so subtle as far as what's happening when and where. But in both of these scenarios, in both the village where he is staying on the Turkish border and the film he is shooting remotely in Turkey on the other side of the border. Over the
phone, basically.
Right. Yeah. He's shooting it like from his laptop, and there's no Wi-Fi, and he's like holding his phone up out the window trying to find it. In both, he is saying, that he's commenting on the traditions and like the societal norms and the rules that bind people and keep them from achieving their freedom, achieving their happiness. And while this modern day city where these Iranian exiles are living, and the little village here on the border, which seems so antiquated, like not a whole lot of difference exists between these 2 places as far as like one might look modern, and one has like dirt roads and, broken stairways and things and farm animals wandering around. Like it's all the same. Nothing has evolved at all. Yeah. And the frustration that exists with that. And so you have these 2 couples who can't be together because these ridiculous, oppressive, cruel rules exist to keep them apart. Yeah. It's funny. We talked about Hit the Road in your list of your best of last year. We were commenting on like the really long single take that Panahi shows us to let everyone know what's happening with this long 360. And then I just watched No Bears a couple days ago, and Jafar Panahi also opens his film with a very long 360 unbroken shot that sets the scene. But whereas there's realism in Panahi's story, there's sleight of hand and there's some trickery going on with what the beginning of Jafar Panahi's film is about. And then the way that transitions to what he's doing in his little room he's renting is just like, there are lots of aha moments here over and over again. And you mentioned that there's some humor, but there's also some sweetness. There's this old woman that he has become friends with who he's fascinated by people and how they live their lives and wants to get to know them in the simplest ways. And I can't recall what it is she's doing down on the ground. Is she cooking something?
I think so. Yeah. She's cooking.
And he, of course, being a filmmaker, has the camera at the ready at all times and wants to shoot her. And she's just like, no, and just the idea of like what film can do. I think that's what he's always exploring. What film can do to shine a light on the way people live, And so there's some sweetness in the way that they interact throughout the course of the movie. It's so subtle what's going on here all at once. It might seem like nothing is happening, as you say, with these men entering and sitting down and having tea, but like the meaning behind moments is always there.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing we see so much in his films. Like I was a big fan of Three Faces as well, which again, sort of, on the one hand, it's a movie about people who are opposed to movies, but on the other hand, they're in it. So it's like he is staging things so realistically that you at times feel like you're watching a documentary until the people being filmed make some comment about how they don't approve of movies or whatever, like the woman cooking, you see her cooking, but then when he wants to film her cooking, she says no, so he's always kind of bleeding through what's real, what's fake, what are we making up here, what speaks to my real current condition in Iran, and what is, the fictional version of me and how that guy, responds to things.
Right. So he made this film in secret at the beginning of 2022.
Yeah.
And then he was arrested again and has since been imprisoned to 6 years.
Yes.
So he is in prison right now.
This premiered at Cannes, though. Yeah. Like he's always managed to like A, make these films, and then B, sneak them out of the country, which is how we're able to see them. And I hope that, he survives this bout of all this, because he's constantly sort of tweaking his captors, and more power to him.
I love his daring. I love his fearlessness. I love the simplicity of his craft, which is so powerful, like unexpectedly powerful in the images that he conveys and the stories he tells. So this is pretty great. I'm saying 9.
I said 9.2. Again, one of my favorite films of 2022. It is opening today in New York and Los Angeles, and I think some other places as well. And it's the kind of movie where, depending on where you live, maybe you want to keep an eye out to see if it's going to be at your museum or a local college. I'm sure eventually, of course, it will be streaming. But yeah, check out No Bears.